We're going live and now.
We're going live in now. We'll do it live.
Wow, that's some terrible echo there, buddy.
I know, it's really bad. So I'm muted in the other room, but we're getting echo from James, I think is what it is.
Yep.
So I'm going to try and mute him and see if they can fix that. And did that work?
I'm still hearing some. Well, here, say
Hold on.
something.
Testing.
Oh, that's
Hey,
much better. There we go.
thanks for coming out to the Worlds Overrun live stream tonight. We're going to do a little bit of time-lapse video. We might even show one of the projects that we're working on. With me tonight is my painter and good friend, Christopher Hirschberger.
Ta-da!
Who is a little monster, and yeah, he's just. I say he's a little monster. He's not so little.
Hey, I'm tiny by default.
Dude, that should be your rapper name. I'm tiny by default.
Yo, I'm tiny by default, and I paint the things.
So we got a bunch of things that we're going to show tonight. We're going to do, I think we're going to do a 30-minute stream for the current Kickstarter that Chris and James and I are working on for Worlds Overrun.
Yep.
So just so you guys know, I can't start. Go ahead and start the time lapse for me, and we'll start talking about this. So we've got in the process of making things, and we'll get around to what Christopher did to contribute for this project, but also I just want to talk a little bit about some of the process that's going on. We decided to record some of the work because most of the time I'm making the assets and I'm preparing them. So we decided to time lapse and pull clips from pieces that we were making for this Kickstarter. And you'll see a bunch of things that you're familiar with, like these are open lock tiles, for instance. I almost always use these for bases that are going to have to be attached to other things, also to use for standardized sizing. Here I'm taking and I'm going to mod a tree, and I'm going to make an entirely new model out of it. But yeah, as we move through this, we might comment on certain things. I'm going to ask Chris to comment on a few things as we move forward with the projects. This video is about 29 minutes. It's going to give us, or 30 minutes. It's going to give us pretty much most of our stream tonight. But like I said before, Chris contributed on the design side and on the painting side, and we finally started painting assets for our Kickstarter, for our demonstrations for our Kickstarter. And while we're watching this video and talking about this video a little bit, I'm also going to have Chris contribute some of the background behind, the choices he made for painting and how he modded some of the pieces, because although we're not really going to do any demos this moment, modding 3D prints is really important to us. And we want to kind of like start talking about this so that the community can hear from us as developers as to what we find important about finishing a 3D print. And so, yeah, Christopher Hirschberger, my very good friend Christopher, you got to paint a whole bunch of pieces. Don't laugh. Don't laugh at me.
I still have a whole table full of stuff I got to ship back to James. But yeah, I did that. I have painted a lot of miniatures here recently. But pretty much like painting any of the figures or anything else for playing Warhammer, which I played for a number of years long ago. I don't really do it anymore, but the whole reason I got into it is I just enjoyed putting together and painting models. And then it became models that you can paint and play with. So as you continue to kind of progress down that road, eventually you start getting into painting terrain and doing stuff because you want unique set pieces on your table. And
that kind of reminds me of something you said earlier, which is that in storytelling, a lot of people are all about the characters, but having an environment to place your characters in can really change, everything you understand about those characters, what have you. And I'm not necessarily asking you to elaborate on that, but I thought it was such a really important thing, because when I was teaching and when he was studying video games, we always talked about the story and everybody loved the characters, but if you don't have a place to play those characters,
Exactly. A pretty character without an environment is concept art. I
yeah.
mean, it's pretty much what it comes down to. Um, but yeah, back with miniatures and stuff, as I played more and more, I wanted pieces that represented or cool pieces that we could use as objectives instead of, water cups and flipping stuff upside down and throwing like a Lego fortress or something on the table. You want something that's unique and works with all the other pieces you have. So naturally the evolution is I paint my army, I paint my miniatures and all that other stuff, and then you start moving into, well, now I want to paint this piece of terrain, and then I want to paint this piece of terrain. And then eventually you've got an entire room dedicated to this stuff with, table setups and all that other thing, so that you can just kind of come in and pick and mix and match. And that's really where I really love the pieces that we've worked with, particularly in this one, mainly because I've been able to handle these and play with them a little bit more than some of the other stuff. But because for a long time I was kind of in a consulting kind of role. They'd bounce ideas and stuff off me, and we just kind of talk about stuff, and wasn't really painting anything or doing any of the other actual work. It was more like, hey, does this look cool? Nah, no, we don't like this. Maybe we should do something else.
But that's one of those other things too, is that I think about like some of the environments like Strata, and I think about that environment was inspired loosely by Star Wars,
Yeah,
Cloud City, and Bespin and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, how lame would it be, if that whole sequence in Star Wars wasn't there, or that environment wasn't there, and you didn't have those conflicts in that environment. Um, and I'm thinking about it when we do get together to play tabletop games, we do get to talk about these things. It's so much more interesting to play in an environment versus just, hey man, we got a ping pong table here, let's just throw some guys down and like
exactly.
have a 300 port war. And I'm just sort of like,
Well,
man, there's so much more that we can do with this table.
and it totally comes in too with, especially with all the terrain and stuff that we can build and make and do now. Um, just printing it out is cool, but that's just the base layer. Like, you should always view, I mean, you don't just take the miniatures out for like Warhammer and stuff and like paint them up and then put them on the table. Or I mean, like, not paint them up. Like, you just kind of prime them and then throw them on there. It's not the same. And your terrain should be elevated to that same level that you do with like your hero characters and stuff. So it's just you're painting on a much bigger piece, and it's going to be a piece you're going to be reusing repeatedly, and you want stuff that kind of matches like environments you'd want to play in. And with all the stuff that we've done here, every single one of the pieces that I've gotten the 3D prints from, I've come back through and I've either cleaned up and modified things, I've added additional elements to them, extra flocking, sand, that kind of stuff, messing with different paint techniques and all sorts of other things, everything from airbrushes to sponges to, just the whole multitude of stuff that you would do on a miniature, just a single character. But now you're doing it on a grand scale with something you're going to reuse, and that's why terrain is so super important.
I want to talk about the two big things that you
Mhm.
modded that everybody freaked out about before. But before I do,
Mhm.
I want to check with James, who's in the wings, and just say if you guys want to reach out and chat to us, I believe the chat is available for the stream. I think it's a live stream.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let him know about that so he can check on
Over
that.
there in the corner thing, I think that one of those directions. That way? No, no,
Yeah,
no, that
yeah,
way.
yeah. It's
That
it's
way.
I think it's
It's
that
over
way.
there.
It's over there. Oh yeah, it's
It's
backwards.
over there. I have to think backwards because this is recording me the opposite direction. Because
Yeah,
on my screen, it's over there.
it's over there. Uh
Uh,
Um, a lot of people in the community and a lot of people that have backed Worlds Overrun in the past lost their minds about I don't remember exactly what we called it, but let's just call it the gel coat that you put on the biopool.
oh, on the pool? Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably
Yeah.
the craziest thing. That was the craziest. Now that is now I know that that's partly paint, but that's also partly a real mod.
Oh
That's
yeah,
not
yeah.
just.
Well, what I did with that particular piece that made everybody super excited was on the base layer of it, I actually painted the bottom of that. And what got poured into it was an air drying acrylic that's generally used for model railroad stuff. And you do it in small layers so that you can add inks and other paints. So what it is about 2 or 3 layers worth of this acrylic dry stuff that goes in there and has a nice water appearance to it. And
And you said it, and you said as it was drying, it had the consistency of bogies.
yes, as it kind of solidifies, you get kind of these, especially when you're mixing blues and greens into it, you basically get boogers. And, I took some of these semi-coagulated boogers and used them on other models.
That's
Um,
such a great mod right there. And I got to tell you, the big thing for me is trying to convince people that are printing the stuff to not just print it, but to mod it, to take it
oh, yeah.
to more than the baseline.
Well, I was gonna say, like
Um,
I said, the terrain itself is just the base level. Everything you can do all sorts of stuff with this, from printing multiple pieces that you then bash together yourself, to, to adding additional mods to each one of them, to experimenting with different paint styles even is a different way of modding them each way. Um,
did you get
and
to experiment with many different paint styles, or did you stay
um,
with your standard?
Primarily, the newer one that I've kinda messed with was basically the water technique stuff, because I really never had a need for any of that, so I hadn't really played with it before, and the other one was I recently started using a lot more airbrush on things. For the most part, if I was using an airbrush, it was basically to base coat everything, and then everything else afterwards was all brush.
Well, the
You
big
know,
part of
paint
the big,
brush.
big part about the airbrush, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're doing all this work, is basically coverage. We've got a lot of area to cover.
Oh yeah, with terrain, it's a lot more difficult to paint the entire piece with a brush. That's where sponges come in handy. That's where paper towels, folded up paper towel. There's all sorts of. We'll have to do a video at some point with some of the paint techniques that are super useful that I think every miniaturist should have in their arsenal of things to pull from.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll definitely do that. We'll also talk about stencils and what have you.
Yeah,
I want to
stencils are
come.
great too, and I haven't messed with as many of those, but I was definitely thinking about it, and since I have access to, like, lasers and vinyl cut stuff and all sorts of other things at my other job, I can just kinda pull those things in and be able to make my own stencils from here, design them out and then have them cut at work.
I have a number of really cool stencils. I'll have to make them available to you.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I want to come back to the gel coat.
Mhm.
The thing about the gel coat is now, you think it's thick enough that we could do, say, for instance, like pitch, like pine pitch.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you could, with that particular stuff, depending on how much and what other, additional materials you add into it, you can get all sorts of different consistencies and colors out of it, all the way up to probably getting a pretty thick, nice, gooey kind of black for,
So
like, tar or pitch.
so we could do tar, we can do amber, we can do water effects, we can do slime effects, we can
Yep.
basically do almost anything that
You
is
can even use
either
it as
wet
gore
or
effects if you
coagulated.
wanted to. Yeah.
What's that?
You could even use it as gore effects if you wanted to.
Well, I think that's where I was going next because I
Yeah.
was trying to say that, hey, here's this gelatinous natural stuff. Now, if we wanted to do, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
build up a little like, I was
Yeah.
thinking about this and we talked about this, but we never got to try it. But I was thinking about taking, say, for instance, a piece of yarn and sort of disassembling it a little bit and running it through that stuff and creating like a pattern that looked like veins, and then just kind of like dabbing that stuff on until
Yeah.
it solidified. Uh-oh, did we lose our video?
I don't know. Looks
I
like
don't
it.
know. Uh-oh.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go. We're
there
back
we go.
again. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Minor
Um,
technical. Oh,
oh
wait,
no.
wait. Now we're
Uh-oh.
loading again. I think we're having a connection issue maybe. Oh, no, there's the
Uh,
picture of the pool.
there's a picture of the pool. Yep.
There's the picture of the pool. Yes, and that one is actually due to the multiple layers. One of the things that I found with that is that since I hadn't really played with it before, the colors that you put into it like to settle closer to the bottom as it kind of like just kind of solidifies and finishes out on its curing process. So by doing multiple layers, I was able to get that really cool kind of like spores and gunky kind of look on there. And then in between those layers, you could always add additional paint if you wanted to. So if you wanted like fish on top of something, or like, from a top down, like you're doing like a koi pond style thing or something of that nature, you could very easily do that on this stuff, or add
So
additional textures like lily pads or any of those kind of things, and still have the paint sealed and protected inside of a second coat.
there's a Japanese artist who does that, but he uses resin, and I think I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. And in
Yep.
fact, as I think about this here, I would almost want to apply it and then pour the gel coat over it. That way,
Mhm.
for instance, near the edge, you could keep it clear, or you can keep it without
Oh yeah.
pigment,
Yep.
so that you can create another layer of depth as it goes down into the pool. Definitely some really neat techniques to be applied to this, and I'm kind of curious to see what we play with on this next.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
um,
interested to see if I can get it to work over a more curved surface, because it takes a long time for this stuff to cure.
oh, it
Uh,
does. So
even
it
even
runs. It runs too easily.
so it runs for a while.
So
Uh,
you wouldn't want to use this as a clear coat, then, would you?
no, not necessarily. I think honestly, a lot of the pieces that would benefit the most from that particular technique aren't going to want everything to be shiny.
Right.
Like you want the water to be nice and shiny, and I would even recommend sometimes if you're done with the rest of the paint job, matte coat the rest of the model just to protect your paint job before you start putting this stuff on, because once it goes on, it doesn't come back off. Like, it's in there, and it's in there good.
Well, I think that's one of those
Yeah.
benefits of the 3D printing, because it's
Yeah.
I don't think it's intentional, but I think it does have a lot of crevices, and for lack of a better term, like a semi-porous nature to it because of all the
Yeah.
layers. So anything you put on it it's staying on there, unless
I mean,
unless
in worst case scenario, you botch like doing one of these procedures on this stuff, you can print another one, and that's never really an issue. It's not like I just spent $100 on this plastic and metal kit from like one of the bigger distributors, and then all of a sudden now I can't use half of it because I ruined part of it on a process, and now I basically have sprue bits for the next one I decided to buy at $100 a pop.
well, I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious if we, maybe we take one of these that's busted one time, and we make a mess out of it and throw some paint on it, and then just dip it in some purple power and see if the paint comes off it well enough, or if it's too, yeah, if it's too porous and just ends up being filled with purple power cleaning solution and just becomes a mess.
Yeah.
So that's
Liquefied. That would be great,
yeah.
right? It just reconstitutes into a ball on the table.
Gross.
A
Yes.
puddle. Well,
Yes.
this was a biopool, now it's actually a biopool. I think there's something living in it. Give up.
Oh.
Uh,
So let's see. What other mods did you make? I remember, didn't you do some flocking and some grass and such?
on some of the smaller ones for the now the big one for Grove, the Grove actual portal, I'm working on those things currently still. It hasn't fully been finished yet, but it's most of the way through its initial processes. But some of the other smaller ones also from Grove, I did do static grass style stuff and extra little bushes and that kind of stuff on there. Uh, Beyond that, the other one was I did a lot of sand because we had a lot of the scorch tiles and stuff, and the
And
sand.
what'd you use to bind the sand to the surface?
Actually, I did some digging around before I did any of that, and Elmer's craft glue of all things, it works the best. Like you
I gotta
just
tell
dilute it with a little bit of water, and you brush it on with an old brush that you don't care about, and yeah, sand don't come off.
you, sand don't come off.
Yeah, even on this one, on the base for this one, the bio vent, there's extra sand on the bottom, and this was also one of the pieces with the airbrushing that came out really, really nice. I'm very happy with this piece.
Yeah.
And it is very
I,
pretty, very stunning.
I really like the base, how the base came out, and how you took advantage of the rocks that were 3D printed versus the adding enough more texture onto it to
We'll
sort of
see.
disguise things.
Exactly, and well, what I used the sand to disguise some of the grow lines and stuff in the base, because
Right.
that to me is always the least attractive part, and just unfortunately is one of those things that happens from time to time between prints. So having these tools and abilities, on hand in order to modify these things to make them the way I want them to look is just kind of where I feel anybody that does miniatures long enough starts doing that anyway.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that everybody wants to have more than just a basic base, more than just a primitive disc or shape without any
Thanks,
life
Spicer.
or distressing or
We can't wait for you to get them either. We're looking forward to sending all these files out. uh,
oh man. I actually excuse me. Since he's here, Spicer and I do a little bit of work with Spicer. I help to engineer his statues, and
mhm.
he and I work together on XMD Academy, where I'm teaching right now for how to improve 3D printing models for 3D printing. Um, so yeah, it's good to have him pop in. Um, let me ask you one more question.
Sure.
And you can ask me questions too, man. This isn't single sided. We work together, so even
I
though
know.
most of what's on going on in my head.
Pretty much, I'm like,
Um,
hmm,
let me think about this.
I don't
Um,
know.
what now this one you're most proud of, but was there? I know that we've talked about this a couple times, but I think that here's where things get tricky. What is some of the things that you really don't like about painting and working on 3D prints? Because I know we do struggle sometimes with cavities
Okay.
and with areas that you really get frustrated with.
Some of
So
yeah, we can go into this. Some of
I
the
and I need to
frustrating
build
ones
you. I need to
actually.
build you a bent brush, like a brush with a little bend in it, little hook brush.
And you can grab them by the side of the ear with it and
Right,
pigtail.
right. Well, I
Um,
think this is worth bringing up
no,
because
no, it is.
as a designer, I make things and I think about this stuff, but I can't solve every problem. But also, I think that people need to be aware that the work that we make is not bulletproof. Nothing
Yeah.
really is.
Well, every iteration we get better with doing this kind of stuff. And
That's for sure.
one of the things that probably was the most frustrating when it came from transitioning from painting like injection molded models versus 3D printed models is the grow lines. A lot of times the grow lines are just really irritating to deal with. It makes it difficult to do any kind of dry brushing from time to time. And really, the only kind of workarounds for a lot of that stuff is to either layer the paint on a little bit thicker in the base coat, which does help to fill in some of those things. I also did an extensive amount of like green stuff work or milliput style work on a few of them in order to work out areas that I wanted to be nice and smooth. Now, that being said, in certain occasions, those grow lines helped add extra texture I didn't have to work for. Like in the hellscape stuff, it looks fine. I like it on all the pieces. It looks good. It works with what's there. But when you've got some of those things on, like, say, a rock that's supposed to be smooth on one side, your options really are bust out the files and kind of sand it down a little bit, maybe hit it with a little bit of some alcohol or something to kind of smooth out the surface a bit. I tried a bunch of different things. I had sandpaper and files on hand for most of it, and anything that I really didn't like or thought was going to give me an issue later, I just mixed up some green stuff and jammed it in there and just sculpted right over the top of it in order to kind of work some. Now, that being said, green stuff is a great thing to have in your toolkit also, or some kind of two-part epoxy or something of that nature that you can sculpt onto. Like even on this piece, I sculpted up. Sometimes the seams don't line up all the way, and that you have that problem with regular models, regular injection models, or pewter models, or anything of that nature too. So 3D printing is not, not an exception to that. And you're going to want to have some of those kind of things to work those issues out with. And that's not something that's specific to 3D printed models. That's just
Uh,
models in general.
yeah, I think yeah, because and I want to mention this because sometimes my students will come and join us and check out these videos later. But just because you can make something with zero tolerance in the computer or in drafting,
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
mean you can mill, mold, cast, or even 3D print or additive manufacture that object with that same amount of tolerance in the real world. There are offsets and defects and all sorts of things that can interfere with that. This piece here, I didn't give it nearly as much tolerance as I would like, but Christopher actually found that to be an advantage in this one instance.
yeah.
So I don't know if you
Yeah,
want to
because I
mention
did
that.
do an extensive amount of green stuff work on the base in general on this one, and I know it looks like it's a relatively flat landscape, but having those rough grow lines and stuff to work with allowed me to make very quick, very kind of messy, almost painterly sculpting techniques into working the pieces together to get one nice cohesive board. And like you were saying, it's just you're there's going to be defects in everything that you do, and until you've done enough of them to start getting to a level where you're comfortable with the detail level output and what you're getting, and there's always going to be some level of tolerance in that as well, you know. I
Yeah, we
think
try and we
yeah,
try and work around just around a 1 millimeter tolerance for anything that we have to cut up.
yeah.
And I am not going to go into the specifics of that because that's a lot of sausage making no one really cares about.
There's a
But
lot of technical stuff that gets a little boring.
yeah, that
But
too.
we're here to talk about the art. Now, that being said, I wouldn't be able to do nearly as well on the finishing end of these if I didn't already have a good base to start off of. And that's really where Eric's design skills show is he's able to give me something that I not only is good enough to work on top of, but something that I actually want to work on top of and modify, you know.
I'm thrilled that he says that. I really am. I mean, we don't need to sit here and pat each other on the back, but I'm also really thrilled that Chris was able to take some of the pieces into one of the two local shops that he frequents, and people were actually asking him,
Yeah.
"Where'd you get that?"
Yeah.
That kind of thing always makes me happy too, because it's one thing when your peer says it who understands all the work that goes into it, but it's also equally cool to have somebody
Mhm.
uh, that doesn't know what it takes to make a thing come up and say, "I want one of those. Where can I get one?"
Yeah.
Um, there's I love making things, but I love sharing those things with people more. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I do.
So
I occasionally will take the paints and stuff and go and just sit in the local, one of the local game stores and just paint, just because it gives it's fun. You get people to ask you questions about it, and a lot of times they're like, "Wow, that's cool. I could never do that," and I'm like, "You can, and I could teach you." It's a lot of hours and patience,
yeah, exactly.
or
I'm
you could
actually.
pay me and I make them.
How much do you charge? Well, do you have a firstborn yet?
Mhm. Yes.
Oh man.
Yes.
Um. Oh man. Today has been so crazy. I actually, a few minutes ago, we saw some photos of the fort. Right now, we're looking at
Mhm.
some helmets that are made. There's a number of helmets, and they're on pedestals because they're either fallen warriors or they're ancient heroes. I guess I'm really excited about these. They're smaller pieces. Um, but we just finished up the fort today. Ian Lovecraft was nice enough to comment on it because we posted some photos. James is really happy with it. We made a really cool gate that slides up and down. That's going to go with it. I might show you guys that here in a minute, but we're just kind of looking at the me sculpting these helmets. These were mostly for fun. Like I said, they were supposed to be like representations of ancient heroes. Um,
I
and a
don't
lot
think
of fun making that. What's that?
I said I don't think I've seen these yet. So I'm
They
over here
they
like watching the stream now.
well, the time lapse is a little silly because I was really just experimenting with the shapes. I really enjoy like I like armor, but basically what it is it's a helmet on a pedestal, and that's like the last piece of armor or the only piece of armor that was kept, and that allowed the uh, the hero to be represented. Um, and it's a really neat concept. I
Is
kind
it
of got it.
come home with your shield or come home on it?
Yeah, basically, and I think I made 5 or 6 helmets. I can't remember. And I just love this idea of, this is the armor that stands in for them in a realm or something like that. I kind of got inspired. The armor is not Japanese, but I kind of got inspired a little bit by I saw a Japanese piece of samurai armor, and it was on this stand, and it was very obviously not. There was very obviously not a person in it, but the almost statuesque presence of it really kind of grabbed my attention. So that's where this concept comes from. And it allowed me to make some really cool fancy or fantasy style helmets and gear that I think would be kind of cool to see out there. They all have the same base. They have a couple different types of cloth, and there's the cloth is supposed to like look like it's blowing in the wind just a little bit. Um, and I guess kind of like a Hall of Heroes kind of thing.
Okay.
But this really
Like
kind of
it.
inspired me. Yeah. James is switching up to the fort again. This
Here's
is
the fort.
this fortress. This is a it's a fort. It's not. You could call it fortress. It's a fort or a base, and it's kind of like a quick deployment sci-fi fort or fortress.
Hmm.
And it's got in this iteration, it's got 2 gates. You can see one gate open on the far side. It's got 2 towers and 2 basic corners. It's you can see a couple characters up on the tower. You can see a couple characters below the tower. All the platforms are playable. I'm
So can
sorry.
you
Go
give
ahead,
us
Chris.
a rough estimate of like the dimensions of said tower stuff?
I think I estimated it at about 600 millimeters, which is 12 inches by 900 millimeters, which is um, 18 inches, give or
Right.
take a little bit, and then 400 millimeters tall in total. But the towers don't have to be built this way. You can take the middle section out because of the way that it prints, and just plug the platform into the middle section so it can be much lower. Plus, the number of pieces here is pretty complex. There's a it, the long walls are actually 2 lengths of wall, but there is a half wall. So there's actually a shorter version of the wall, which is half of the section going away from us, or the
Okay.
shorter section. There's
So in printing, we have options.
In printing, you have options, and there's enough
Mhm.
options that make it very, very useful. And I've already Ian made a suggestion today that I had in my mind, but I really wasn't sure I was going to pursue, which is how much more modularity can we get out of this? Because I know that's hard to see here, but this is what's really neat about this is that the walls and the palisade or the walkways are completely separate. Oh, I love this shot. I actually was playing with shadows. There we go. So this is the color. This is the ID map, and each color is supposed to represent or indicate a different piece of geometry. So if you look off on the right hand side here, um, is it the right hand side? My right hand? I think it's the right hand side. There's kind of a salmon color and a green color. That's the palisade with the characters on top of it, and then there's the wall. Well, you lay them down on their backs and they print separately, and the walls lock together so that you can make a proper wall. But the palisades are freestanding, and we may provide a tool where they can kind of like where you can kind of like connect a couple of them, but generally they're supposed to be
Got a
freestanding.
couple little like open locks on one side. You can just kind of click it in place, and that would be good.
I have to make a custom one, and I have an idea of how I'm going to do it. Because there isn't a lot of material. That's the other thing about this. This entire system here, the Palisades in particular, are as minimal amount of material as possible. We were trying to make something that was large and covered a lot of area, but was
But would
also, it's going to be really inexpensive to make. So I'm assuming that a full length palisade will take. I'm just making a shot in the dark guesstimation here. Maybe it'll take you 8 hours for a full length of wall. So that's 6 inches of palisade right there. Just the palisade, not the wall. And that'll probably take you, if that takes more than 8 hours, I'd be surprised. But there's very little material there because I went with the minimum structure because it's supposed to be like a military installation, which they literally like.
just like a rough outpost or scouting base kind of thing. Like it's
Right,
been thrown up real quick.
right.
Yeah.
And the walls themselves do some of the same things where we have gaps in them to minimize material, but also to provide armament, which is actually a lot of fun because it gives you a really cool silhouette. Um, and the corners are kind of the same way. I think the pieces that are the most expensive to print are probably going to be the towers themselves, even though you can see there's a huge chunk of material missing out of the middle of them.
Yeah.
Because in battle, who's going to be standing on a ladder?
I mean, this does also bring up another good point about modifications and stuff. And although I haven't had a chance to play with this particular piece, when you have outposts and stuff,
Yeah,
you can always, once you've got it printed, you'd always come back in and like carve out spots, hit it with
a
a
heat
heat gun,
gun. Yep,
mess with stuff
butane
like that.
torch.
I've
Yeah,
got a wood burner. That thing
yeah.
does wonders.
I actually, you know what I realized today was I was looking at this and reading Ian's comment to me, and which like was very generous because Ian's kind of a quiet guy from what I understand. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I really want to take one of these walls and distress it. But then I was like, ooh, we could have it overgrown, like Grove is interacting with it, or ooh, we could have it being overgrown or taken over by Thorn, where it's being corrupted,
Mhm.
kind of like what happens in StarCraft with
Oh,
the
the alien stuff from Raven.
with the Zerg, yeah. And I was like, man, there are so many options for this beyond expanding it to make a more complex outpost or base or structure. Um, and I was really excited about that because I love when we make a thing and we can use it in multiple ways, or we can take it and all we have to do is like add some things to it or punch some holes in it.
Yeah.
Um, and this is completely new. Like this is like the forward operating base was just like, okay, we're sending you out with a box of
Here, you
a
get a
fort.
box of crayons. We got a couple of loose grenades and a bag of marshmallows. You figure it out.
here's here's a here's a fort in a box.
Yeah.
You go assemble it.
It's like insta drop. It's like
Yeah,
Legos. It just erects out of the ground.
yeah, but it's all brand new. None of the corners are worn off. The paint's still kind of fresh.
Yeah.
So get distressing. It's going to be the next thing.
Which does
And
remind me, one of your initial questions was where I was coming up with some of the color schemes for some of this stuff that I worked on.
we know where that's coming from. You just had a lump of cheese or a big glass of milk, and then
Biohazard. No,
oh, is that corn in there?
I don't know. It looks like it. Um, but yeah, I would say the one IP that I got to play with the most, as far as the colors go, was the Thorn stuff. And I did
Mm,
do several iterations of different colors on a few of the different pieces, but I kind of ultimately settled on like the purple and cream color style stuff because a lot of the aliens for, say, like the Zerg or like Tyranids from 40K, one of the predominant color schemes is that, and it seems to translate really well to like the crazy alien stuff
I
because a
think
lot of
that
it has like bone plates and you got like
I
soft gooey undersides that you want different
the
reds and purples and blues in.
the Halo Covenant did the same thing. Their
Yes.
primary colors were purple and I think green.
Yeah. Like a
And
purple, it was like in a weird, it was like purple green and like a cream or a beige color for a lot of
yeah,
armor and adornment.
and that reminds me of if you're gonna really push it, the Joker has a lot of those same colors.
I think that particular color combo as a palette tends to work really well. So, I mean, I think that's ultimately why a lot of people settled on that back in the day on like Tyranids and stuff.
Yeah,
Just because it looks nice, it's pleasing to the eye. Um, and it gives you can get to play with greens, which are some of my favorite colors to work with anyway. Greens are basically in the center of our color spectrum as far as what we see as humans. So
yeah,
it
yeah. The bigger,
to play with.
yeah,
But it gives you like you can do some really cool stuff because even playing with those greens and purples, you can go real dark and deep on like the blue end of it, or you can go really kind of like vile and gross and nasty with like the yellow end of it, where they start getting really kind of fluorescent.
yeah, and some of the blue greens can actually look also iridescently toxic in a very unusual way. Yeah,
You can use those
absolutely.
for like markings on something, and that looks nice too. Especially like markings on a carapace for one of these things. And yeah.
I actually liked the one I liked the most was the platform from the Unchecked Growth that you painted.
Uh,
I thought that
yeah,
was probably one of the most interesting aspects or interesting paint jobs.
yeah.
I think we lost our video, or we lost.
I think it ended because we've been in here for 40 minutes now. So between
He,
cycling
he,
through videos and
we're,
stuff.
we're still live. We're
Yeah,
still
I
live.
know. No, no,
You know what?
our initial thing is done now at this point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Real quick. I was hoping we would get some questions, but you know what I'm going to do is I'm gonna share my screen
Okay.
if it'll let me. Share screen.
I don't know. Can you?
I'm gonna try.
It keeps changing. Like I keep
I know.
moving
I know.
from one side and over here. Oh,
There,
there we
there
go.
it is.
That
There
looks
it
like a
is.
shared screen.
Yep, yep. So, I want to show this to you really quickly. This was so much fun to make, and so many really cool influences. I want to show you guys just how this platform works. So this is all put together so that I can do a render. This is not how I work, generally speaking. I'm gonna pick a long section of wall. Actually, we'll pick a half section. So here's this half section of wall, and you can see how light it is from the side. This is the direction it would print up in, and how little is there.
It's like, ooh, pretty.
I was having so much fun doing sort of a minimalistic thing. And then for clearance, it was like, okay, you got to step up, and then you get on the palisade itself, and then you can run along the wall. And what we'll probably do is that most of them have this sort of square end on them. Let's see if I can show it to you quickly. So you have the square end. So I'll make a fitting that fits on over these square bits, and we'll make a couple of different versions of that.
Kind of
So
like a
that they,
coupling, so you can just click them together.
yeah, and I was also talking about making other modification tools and add-ons that would come with this later.
I think that's good. That gives additional iterations on the same project and more ways to use it. And as a gamer and somebody who has enjoyed a lot of tabletop stuff, anything that I can use in multiple ways is are going to be first purchases over stuff that's very specific to like one campaign. You know,
Yeah, here,
anything that I can iterate on, cycle through, change, or use a different side of for different games is going to be a higher priority for me. Just because space is limited and you don't want your entire house filled up with miniatures.
yeah,
Then you get a
yeah.
house full of miniatures.
We also did this. Check this out. So the ladders are playable. These are actually two ladders jammed together, and the reason for that was to save time and also make them so you can print like numbers of them.
two
But
let two ladders jammed together. That kind of reminds me of like rednecks trying to get on the roof or something. Duct taped in the middle. I mean,
hey, careful now. Some of our customers are rednecks. Um,
I didn't
but
say
yeah,
it.
I wanted to be able to get up on this high platform. We really wanted this like ridiculously powerful tower that basically overlooked the entire area. Lots of heavy armor plating.
Yeah.
Same as down here on the walkway. So definitely got a lot of room to maneuver characters around. You can get two characters side by side, for instance, if you really need to. And I think you can put easily on top here, probably close to 6 is probably the max I would put up there, but you could put up 8 if you really want to push it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks like it could fit a decent sized squad of guys.
Yeah, and all of these things have some standard shapes in them, so that we can do like little hooks and things like that. So if we need to do add-ons, we can add
Very cool.
banners and
Ooh,
other.
banner posts. That'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, there's a number of small things that we were talking about doing, but I haven't really beyond the basic fortress.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really go beyond that because it's a lot to make just this. This was a few days worth of work. Checking it with my teammates, checking it for scale, checking it for, does it work? I apparently have
checking it multiple times.
Yeah,
like good models and bad models.
well, I had to make the ladder work. I didn't want to put too much of a slant on it, but one of the things that really kind of irked me was that I was checking it. There's a left and right ladder, and on one direction I have to take a notch out of it, and on the other direction I think I have to take most of a. Let me see if that one's different.
Like a little rung or whatnot.
Yeah, I have to take a portion out of both the left one and the right one.
Gotcha.
But it's
so that it fits properly in those locations.
Yeah, one is designed for the corner platform, so that this is the corner platform down here.
Gotcha.
And then one is designed for like a standard wall, and so I think I have to take out. I had to take out this. So this is the standard one. This one's missing a notch, and the other one's also missing a notch, but they're different notches because of how they align with the wall.
Gotcha.
That was just like, that's a mod that I didn't want to have to make, but it was like, it's either that or put more of a slant on it.
Yeah.
And because I was looking at, I was looking at the ladders in naval vessels, and they're not really staircases. They're more like ladders, and they're very, very horizontal. And I really wanted that because I wanted this base to feel like that. The only thing I didn't put in there, because I was like, no one's gonna really get upset about it, was like a handrail. But we very could easily done that. We kind of have one, if you think about it.
I mean, it could always be an add-on that you put in there later too. I mean,
well, yeah, because there is these slotted holes, but
you get
these slotted holes
design
could kind of
snaps into that, or something that you can glue onto those sides, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But sorry, this is War Man. We don't have time for safety. OSHA's not coming out here to check this. Right? It's just shoot him.
shoot him. Did you see that guy? Shoot him.
Did it move? You should probably shoot it.
Hey, yo, Jimmy.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man.
But yeah.
Yeah, man.
So that's war.
That's war. That's war. I do not have a very good
bug hunt. Yep.
Oh man, I gotta tell you, there's a couple of guys I know that play Infinity that I hope they're gonna get all into this. But I'm also hoping
I didn't realize that you made those little extra towers on the side to be multiple tiers, because it'd be really cool to have like one large tower and one small tower on that.
Well, here's what it is that I had to cut it so that this purple part can print upside down. So if you look at this isn't going to print like this. So you flip it upside down, and you're good to go. And James is looking at me, cutting this up, and he's like, "Well, can you take the upper platform and just plug it into the lower portion?" I'm like, "I guess you can," and it is it is just about the right height. Maybe not in this example, because I did make an edit to this, but it is the right height to take a ladder in the modded version, in the properly edited version. And it's like, okay, now you can do a half. You can do a half tower, which means that you can just plug the ladders in right there, and then use that space that way, and you still get that open cavity. But in this case, you probably want to glue it down because it's going to have a different loadout. But yeah, you could totally have if you didn't
put it on there, and it's like a lopsided dinner plate, and just goes boop, and all your guys go out into the bugs. Everybody's sad.
Well, really, just turn around and be like, "Those guys were sacrifices. Leave us alone."
Yeah. Here, Giant bug overlords, eat these members. We do not need them. No, no, Bob. Be quiet. You'll be dead soon.
What's the guy they're always telling to shut up? I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember.
yeah.
Remember his
I'm
name.
not done
Carl. We're
yet.
sending you. We're sending you, Carl.
Only if it's the llama, because that guy's kind of a jerk.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, so this is some of the stuff we're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, man. You wanna talk about anything else? We got time, but it's also getting late too. So
I think for right now, I think we pretty much have covered most of the stuff, the painting, some of the new stuff that's being worked on, that kind of thing. I'm
yeah,
happy with it.
awesome. Look, wait, we did we get a comment?
Wait.
Live comments.
Was there a live comment?
Forward base for bug hunt. So somebody from our chat is not acting the way that it's supposed to.
Well, it was popping up on the small channel here, so I was trying to do a shout out when things came through.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Yeah, forward base for bug hunt. Yes, absolutely. Forward base for bug hunt. Well, I for those of you that are going to check this out later, for those of you that are going to talk to us throughout the week and throughout the Kickstarter,
yep.
I want to say thank you ahead of time. But if you guys have anything that you guys want to see or have us talk about, we're going to try and stream at least once a week during the Kickstarter.
I think for the most part, I think we've planned them out. So it's gonna typically we'll do at least one on Thursdays, generally in the evening. If we do something else, we'll post it across the social media stuff and try to give you guys some advance notice on that. But we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. With your support, we get to make cool things like this, and then we get to see this cool stuff on tabletops.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and
I'm
that's
looking
the
forward
fun
to
part.
that.
I will do a full photo of my current table downstairs when I've got all the pieces that I've got currently finished, and we'll post that up because that table is loaded.
Oh, wait! You've got to tell them. Hold on a second. Before we close out, you
Mhm.
have to tell them what your grandma did when she saw that one piece that she.
Oh, yes. When my grandmother saw the biopool with the little eggs in it.
Oh no, not that one. The one about the grove tree.
Oh, the tree?
You have another. You have two stories now. I didn't
I
hear
do.
about the
I
biopool.
have
All
I
right,
have to talk about the pool.
tell the biopool, then we'll tell about the tree, and then we can go.
The biopools one, what was it? So I showed it to her, and she really, really liked the paint job on it. And she was looking at it over, and she's kind of holding it and going over it. And I don't like the green. And then she goes about some other stuff and looking at it. She's like, I don't like the green. And then about the third or fourth time, I'm like, you really don't like the green, do you? She's like, I don't like nasty water. I'm like, okay, we can, yeah, don't drink that water. That water is bad.
Grandma's my hero.
Oh,
But I want
the
you to
other
tell her.
one was
Yeah.
the Grove. We had a standalone Grove tree, and when I had showed her some of the models and told her that they were 3D printed, she's like, "They're what?" And anyway, she really liked one of the trees, so I painted that one up for her and we gave her that one. So
She
she's got a little 3D
shouted from the
tree
table.
sitting on the mantle.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so happy that Grandma liked one of the trees that I made and that you painted. That is
He
really
gets to
really
pick up
cool.
it. He gives us something else to talk about. She's like, "These are so pretty. Why is
well,
green? Why is it always with the green?"
and, we got it. What we'll have to do is we'll have to do a tree that's got some bright gold resin coming out of it next time.
Oh, so some amber, yeah.
Yeah.
We could use those, like some nice little amber crystals or maybe something of that
Yep.
nature. That'd be kind of cool.
Yep. That would
We
be
could do
wicked
some
cool.
translucent too,
Yep.
maybe. Print those
Yep.
translucent, hide some LEDs in those. Get some
I
like stuff going on.
I think that would be wicked cool. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna have to play with some more wiring.
Don't
I'll
let you
try not
shoot
to
yourself.
mess with the house.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Again, if you're checking this out later, after we're done, thanks for checking it out. And, we're going to be doing more of these. So hope you guys have a good night.
Yep.
Yep.
Good night, and we will see you next time.
Next time.